at the end of the year, after $5.1 million in top line revenue, the company made $400,000. Most people really don't know the questions to ask.
More valuable you are to your business, the less valuable your business is.
Most CPAs that I find in my history that are going out there, 95% of them are compliance driven only. They're a reporter. Their job was to fit the numbers inside the boxes and tell you this is how much you owe. There are clients that we've reduced their tax liability 80, 90, or 100%. I can't tell you how many times, Joey, that I've talked to someone like, I wish I found someone like you 7 years ago. Well, unfortunately, I can't go back in time, but all I can try to do is let's not continue making the same mistake and let me help you direct that.
When would you say is the right time to start also play defense as much as you are willing to play offense in business? Welcome to Beyond the Bottom Line. I'm your host, Joey, and today we're going to pull back the curtain how the ultra wealthy actually protect and grow their wealth tax efficiently. So each week we sit down with the smartest financial experts to uncover strategies that business owners can implement right now to keep more of their wealth and pay less in taxes. So today I'm joined with Russ, strategist and tax mitigation expert who's guided entrepreneurs for over 25 years through growth, tax planning, and wealth protection. You're going to want to sit through this conversation. We're going to break down the biggest financial mistakes entrepreneurs make when scaling, how to align business growth with personal wealth, and the one principle that Russ says every business owner should follow to scale smarter and be more tax efficient. So welcome to the show, Russ.
Thanks for having me, Joey.
Awesome. So let's start with this one. A lot of entrepreneurs thinks that scaling is always a win, right? More revenue, more opportunities. But I know you've seen a lot of businesses over the last 2 decades. So in your experience, can growth actually increase risk if it's not structured properly?
100%. I mean, one of the biggest things that I think everybody thinks that if I sell more, I make more.
Hmm.
And I learned that lesson early on in life. I actually had one of the companies I had was a construction company. And, my first year in business, we were in business 10 months and we did about $800,000 in revenue.
Hmm.
And we made about $300,000 net profit. And with that, it was myself and my partner, not really knowing what we were doing. We knew understood business, but we kind of learned as we earned, as we said. Right.
Yeah.
Well, being a business mind and structure and design, I said, listen, we got to increase our business. So I did year over year over year. I got to the point where I call it greed because it's not knowing the value is we got to a point we were doing about $5 million in top line revenue. We had transitioned from being just residential into small commercial and started getting into some larger projects. And at the end of the year, after $5.1 million in top line revenue, the company made $400,000.
Hmm.
Well, I said, there's a problem here. And the problem is that we got focused on the top line revenue, but I lost and didn't have time to focus on the bottom line revenue. And it's not a charity. So I wanted to understand where I went wrong. So I used my own personal experience to help me understand that there's ways to kind of do things better. So I really adapted and live by the phrase of working smarter, not harder. Not that I have a problem with hard work. I have a great work ethic from that design. And I think that's always important for anybody, but scaling, everybody looks at it in a different perspective.
Hmm.
And what I want people to really understand is that it's about what you're making today, but it's not what you make, it's what you keep. That's the other part of the equation. Because a lot of times, as you start to scale up and you start bringing in additional people, now you have more employees. Every time you bring on an additional employee, you bring on a different liability because you
Yep.
have employee expenses, you have insurances, you have liability. That's the other thing that comes with the equation. And every time you bring on a new person, you also inherit their problems. So I like to think of like being a glorified babysitter until you get to a point where you're scaled to where you're a corporation and
Yep.
that you maybe have some officers or some high level managers in place to take care of the people below. But anybody starting a business has to basically walk through the field in order to get to the other side. And that's really where it comes down to. And there's a lot of people in America, especially that we focus with, that are small businesses. And I say small business could be anywhere from $250,000 a year in revenue to $100 million revenue. That could be a small business based on the size. So they still mostly go through the transition points. And I find a lot of businesses that fall in that $2 to $10 million range that really have nobody that helps them. They
Mm,
have their CPA, of course, that they may have started the business with. They have their attorney who may have helped them incorporate or LLC or whatever, and they don't know the difference. They don't know what questions to ask. And if you don't know the question to ask, how are you supposed to know the difference?
yeah.
And that is really what I find to be one of the biggest problems, in all honesty, Joe, is that most people really don't know the questions to ask because they have a business. They may be good at what they do, and it's crazy. I mean, I was just with a business owner this past week, and I sat down with him, and we went through a bunch of different conversation points. And his business is doing about $6.5 million in top line revenue. He's doing well. He's right around 20% margin, so he's doing well with the business. But what happens is he works in the field because he's a technical service,
Yeah.
but then he has to spend another 40 hours running the business. So what is that causing for him? It's causing angst inside the family because his wife never sees him. His wife is actually part of some of the business. So we've done these particular parts of the business and started going through an overview with him and found out that when I asked him, well, what is it that you want?
Mm,
He's like, I just want to do what I enjoy doing. I hate this part of the business. So I said, what do you really want to do? He said, listen, I would like to do this. And he's 52 years old. I'd like to do this for another 2, 3 years, and then just be able to go hunt and fish because that's what I would really like to do because I haven't been able to do it. I said, okay. So if I could show you how to do that, is that something that would make sense? He said, well, absolutely. Well, the conversation now changed to where I could sit there and show him what he wants to do in the business and what his strength and his excitement is. He's recruited 40 people into the company that he enjoys the culture. And he is in a situation where he's a commodity in a sense in his industry,
yeah.
and people are interested in what he has to offer. So I said, listen, let me help you understand an exit strategy. Let me help that what paint a picture for what that looks like. And one of the biggest fallacies, in my opinion, Joey, is that when people start in business, it's kind of funny. In order to go get financing or backing to open up your business, you need a business plan.
Yeah.
Well, just like a book has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yeah.
Most people don't plan for the
Think about
end
the end.
inside their business. They
Mm,
don't plan for an exit strategy. Okay. And the exit strategy may be in business, maybe because you're selling your business, you're closing the business down, or life happens and
yeah.
maybe you get sick or you die. Okay. Now, those are all important points that you need to have a conversation with people. And you know what? I haven't met a CPA yet who asks those questions to their client. And unless I'm talking to an estate attorney, they don't ask that question either.
Mm,
Because the one thing you'll learn by most attorneys out there is attorneys don't ask questions unless it's pertaining to what you asked them to start with. They're
yeah.
never going to offer any additional information above and beyond that. And that's a shame. It really is. So what I try to do is I try to be a value add when I'm talking to a client because like them, I speak from personal experience. I may not know their specific business, but I know business and I know life. And you need to understand key points. And the first one that I always focus on in this business and what I've been doing is legacy. And legacy isn't necessarily what happens after you're gone. Legacy is what you create while you're alive that
Yeah.
people will remember. And that
Mm.
to me is the way to measure your success is the legacy that you create by the family and whoever else that you leave in your passing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it all comes down to keeping more of what you earn, like you said. And I think one of the biggest challenge that most business owner faces, and I'm guilty of that as well. And it's to live with that claim of the more valuable you are to your business, the less valuable your business is, right? And if you look at it with this lens, a lot of businesses need to rethink about how they're going to bring valuation. Because at the end of the day, that's why they built the business, right? So there's a lot to unpack on what you said, but I want to touch on what you about keeping more of what you earn, right? Because there's the top line, which is super sexy. It's what you see online, what you claim, and when you present yourself to other people. And then there's the bottom line, right, which is the profit and everything. And then there's what you actually keep, which there's a good distinction between that. And what do you think? Why do you think it's so hard for especially small business owners to understand the difference between those three things, the top line, the bottom line, and actually what you keep in a business?
I think a big part of that, it's a great question, Joey, is a big part of that is pride. All right. As a, when someone
I
starts a
agree.
business, they have that, let me pound on my chest success model. I've created this successful business.
Yep.
And that's awesome. And you'll see that. And I see it happen in a lot of different industries. And to your point, when you're working inside your business and you are good at what you do and you master the mistakes and do the different things and you become proficient at that particular point, the question that you really need to learn to ask yourself is, if I'm not here, will my business continue to run?
Mm,
Back to exactly to where it is, because the more valuable you become to your business, the less valuable your business is. So a lot of people don't understand that mentality when it comes down to, what do I need to do to exit this business? What is my realistic plan? Is it 5 years? Is it 25 years? Do I want to hand it down to my family? If that's what you want to do, then you need to kind of have that plan and work towards that plan. It's
yep.
no different than any other project that you'll create. If you're going to create or do a project, you have to know what you're trying to accomplish. I want to build a model plane. Okay, well, now you have a project. What does that look like? What
Yep.
does your time correlate back to for cost of goods, cost of services, and what's going on?
Mm,
Business terms that people don't understand when you start asking them. I'll talk to a business owner who's in retail and I'll say, okay, what's your CAC and your LTV? And they're like, my who,
mhm.
my what? And a lot of people don't understand these terms, and it's not their fault per se. They didn't go to school for business, the majority of them.
Yep.
They found something they were good at that might have been a hobby or something they fell into, and it works.
Yep.
Okay. But just to clarify for those on the call, a CAC is customer acquisition cost, all right? And what is the LTV is the long-term value. Well, you have to know in business, what does it cost you to acquire a customer?
Yep.
And is that customer a one-shot wonder, or is there a long-term value? Is there ability to sit there and get additional value? A lot of people out there, because again, they're good at their business, they're not necessarily good at running the books or whatever's going on. So when I ask someone, so what's your top line revenue? And these are the key questions I'll ask. I do $2.5 million. Okay, awesome. What's your bottom line? What's your net? How much did you take out of the business? Well, I
Mhm.
took home $250,000. You took home $250,000, or you put $250,000 on your pass through income tax? Well,
Yep.
I put that on my tax. So what did you end up keeping? Well, in my current tax bracket, I kept about 200,000. Okay. So you made $2.5 million dollars. After everything's all said and done. You made $200 or $200,000 net. All
Yep.
right. And if you break that out and how many hours a week did you work? Well, I work 50. Okay. So you come back
Yep.
and say, well, you made $4,000 a week net on that basis. So, and you're working what, 50 hours a week. So you're making 80 bucks an hour. Not a bad place to be. Okay. Are you good with that? And they say yes or no. And I'll say, okay, well, what happens if that goes away? Because if you sell your business, what are you going to do to replace that? What is your exit strategy? What does that look like? Because most likely you don't want to work until the day you die.
Yep.
So, and it's amazing, out of 100 clients that I'll talk to, 95 of them won't have an understanding of that simple equation.
Mm,
And I have to really help them understand that particular basis, because it makes sense, because they need to know their exit, not just for the business, but for their life. They don't want to have to work forever. And if you don't take care of what you're doing, it's a process. So, one of the key points I talked to someone about is I said, listen, life is a sacrifice. The difference is you have to choose when you're going to make the sacrifice. You're going to do it now while you're working and earning.
yep.
Okay. Or you're going to try to do it in when you call it retirement or non working anymore, and try to live your life in the same manner you're accustomed. So it's an education process, is the biggest part of this equation, Joey, is
Yep.
because they don't think of these additional questions, because no one's ever asked them those before.
Hmm. Yeah, that was the other point I wanted to touch on because obviously we have a community of financial experts as well. And every time they speak with those business owners, the number one recurring theme is they're surprised of how much business owners don't know about tax efficiency, legacy planning, succession planning, all that fun stuff. So now just to make it tactical for the viewers or business owners watching this, that like they agree with everything we've said over the past 10 minutes, what should they think of if they're in a situation like that $2.5 million top line, paying themselves 250, making 200 after taxes, what's the next steps for them? Is it to optimize how much they can make from like how much less taxes they can pay? Or is it to think about their legacy plan right away? Like, what are the first step that business owner should make?
Well, another great question, Joey. And, for me personally, after doing this for over 35 years, one of the most important thing when I talk with people is legacy planning. And, I so much so that a lot of times I'll ask people that question when we first start talking, what's the most important thing in the world to you?
Yeah.
And if if it's not my family and God or God and family in the first couple questions or a couple statements that they make, I typically will change the direction of the conversation because I'm really not interested in working with someone who doesn't see a greater value. That's me personally.
Yep.
And I believe that wholeheartedly for everybody. Now, some people out there, Joey, and listen, they're entrepreneurs and they're business owners, and that's all they want to do. And they use money as a measuring stick. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. That
Yep.
doesn't align with my values. So typically, when I talk with someone like that, I'll share that with them and not to be, say anything different. I'm like, listen, I'm sure that there's probably someone out there who might be better fitted for your particular situation because you are looking for a different type of person to work and represent you in this line. I want to sit there and show you the importance of taking care of what you have today moving forward. Because to me, I find the full value of anybody who decides to go out there and work and sacrifice for their family, theoretically. That's the number one priority. And they have to be aware that if they don't make it home from what they're doing for work today, there has to be a plan in place. Okay. Now, hopefully, nothing happens in the interim. So, when I talk to them, they wanna know their numbers. They always wanna know your numbers in business, so I always emphasize the numbers. So, if someone's making 2.5 million top line and then they drop in 10%, which depending on the business is not necessarily a bad thing. So, how do you get that more? How do you take more time?
Yep.
And so the scaling part becomes maybe one of the questions at that point, because of that 2.5 million, how much were they directly involved with in processing? And they have to learn, and this is another big part that a lot of business owners will struggle with, especially small business owner, is letting go of that responsibility and bringing in leverage, bringing in someone else that they can sit there and if you can go out there and train two, three, four more people that can replicate or at least participate in that growth standard, then you can actually start to grow your business because now you're insulating yourself in the fact that if you're not showing up, if you're not the one on the phone dealing with the clients or whatever's going on, that you still have revenue still coming through the door. So there's a lot of similarities in a lot of business owners that I run into, especially small business owners that do well for themselves, especially home improvement, as an example, home improvement
Yep.
contractors. They may be very good at what they do, but they have to work with their tools every day. Okay. When they stop working with the tools, the hand tools, and they start using other people are becoming tools for them in the business. Now they understand the concept of leverage, and now they can start growing their business. And now they can sit there and they can take what their skill set is of doing that. Well, if their skill set isn't that, because there's a lot of good salespeople that aren't necessarily good managers, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of good doers that aren't necessarily business owners. So that is a major issue we run into, and you kind of have to, through conversation, figure that out with the client. Because I could sit there and present a tremendous business plan to somebody to show them how to scale their business, but if they're not of that aptitude, then it's going to be a disconnect. They're going to sit there and they're going to make excuses, and it's
Mhm.
like, listen, I don't have time for excuses, and nor do you. So I'm going to show you the concept of scaling and leverageability if it makes sense, but you have to be willing to commit. And that is a major part of the conversation, their commitment level. Some people, well, we get attracted to a lot of people because they're trying to save money in taxes, Joey. And yeah, Joe, and taxes is a pain point. 100%. No one likes to pay more taxes than you need to. And I don't want anybody to pay an extra penny than they absolutely need to. And there's a
Yep.
tremendous amount of strategies based on the person's dynamic that we can facilitate that way. So we're addressing a pain point, but sometimes the bigger pain points are the way they operate their business.
Hmm.
And they sometimes are receptive to that, sometimes they're not. And So you have to, it's a lot of unpacking sometimes in certain situations. If they were coming in because they had a problem with, say, with their car and the transmission was slipping, I could focus on the transmission. It's easy process. What we need to do is go through a diagnosis, theoretically, okay? So when we do a discovery for our clients, is to figure out where they are mentally, in business, and financially, because they all intertwine in this whole dynamic. So
Yeah,
we
it's
have to
as
find a
important.
plan.
Mm. No, I hear that. It's as important, both of them, right? Because if someone doesn't have the same motivation, doesn't want to do that for their family, for their faith, or something greater than them, and just chase the money, then they're never going to be able to take that next step, right? Because you need extra forces outside of just your financial desire to be able to make those hard decisions, like letting go of control and getting other people to help you getting leverage. I totally agree with that. And one point you touched on is it's not just tax advice. It's not just tax planning, legacy advice. And most business owners, they just rely on a few people, like their CPA. Like that's the only person they have on their team that they used to for taxes and for anything else. But CPA is not going to help you scale a business, right? Or get you from 2 million to 10 million. So what's what's the team that a business owner should have in place in order to get everything they need from that tax planning, from that scaling strategy, from that legacy planning? Do they need multiple people? And what about those that just rely on their CPA for that?
That's a great point, Joey, because understand most people's dynamic out there today, even in business, if you have
Mm.
a CPA is a vendor. And they usually
Yeah.
pay the vendor. Now they may be retained by they may have a retainment or, an engagement agreement with their CPA. Typically they do if even if they're just doing taxes, but there's different levels to that. So there could be bookkeeping, there's tax planning, there's taxes. Most CPAs that I find in my history that are going out there, 95% of them are compliance driven only. They're not talking
Yeah.
about strategies or planning methods. Okay, you may get some younger CPAs that are out there that are coming into that because it's a buzz in the industry currently,
Yep.
but there's a true void in the industry out there, which is why I think our particular part or what we've emphasized on is blowing up across the board. It's becoming more and more talked about, popular. So with the methods that we're creating is that we're coming in with strategies, not just for the business, but for them personally to help them understand to actually create a team mentality. And again, if you have a CPA and you have an engagement with them to do your taxes and bookkeeping or whatever based on the size of your business, they may be paying that CPA $2,000 to $5,000, $10,000 a year, whatever that number is. But they're not your partner in business. You're not going to usually just be able to pick up the phone and have a conversation with them unless they're your friend, because everyone, like a CPA or an attorney, if you call them to say hello or ask them a question, the time clock starts
Yeah.
and they're going to send you a bill. So what'll happen is a lot of people in business won't make that phone call because they don't want to invest in something. And that's not that they don't want to invest in business. They may not understand what they're investing in, or they don't know what questions to ask specifically. So they'll call their CPA if they want to buy a piece of equipment, or they'll do something to try to know the numbers because it makes sense. So they ask a very targeted question typically. They're not asking about business experience because,
Mm.
in all honesty, there's a lot of CPAs out there that are good at what they do, but it doesn't mean they're good business people. Okay. Just because you're an accountant and a CPA does not mean you understand the full facet and construct of business.
Yeah.
Same thing with an attorney. An attorney may be good about certain things, and even though they went to law school and they read all the law books and did all the things that need to go through, they're not necessarily a business focused attorney. They may be handling litigation, they may be handling workman's comp. Who knows? They may be a general practice or private injury learning attorney. That doesn't mean that's the person who's going to give you direction. So my biggest thing, and it's not a point to me, it's just a void in the industry, is to find targeted people or targeted people that can help you scale your business if that's your mentality. A lot
Mm.
of times, business owners that of a certain industry will seek out mentoring from other business owners.
Yep.
So that's always a great tool to go after because if you're in business, let's say you're in woodworking as an example, most likely in order to learn some of the caveats or issues that are going on, you talk to some larger companies to find out what they did to get to that size.
Yeah.
because now you have a model you can try to follow if that person's willing to share it with you. Okay. But just like anything else, and what you need to understand is that if you're giving time or investing time, there's a price to pay for that. All
Yep.
right. And you have to accept that particular fact today because you do get what you pay for. All right. If you walk into a doctor's office, Joey, do you ever question the fact that you're going to pay for service?
Yeah. Of course.
Never, right? You know what's going to happen. And when you sit there and you find out that you have a problem through the discovery, and now you're sitting there with a specialist like a cardiologist, what you're looking for is the cardiologist to come in and say, listen, here's what the results of your test are, questions that we've asked you. Here's where you are because this is the problem that you're facing. We're need to find something that's going to take care of that problem for you. And we're going to do this and we're going to need this procedure. And you say yes, yes, and yes, please just make it better. Well, you should treat your business in the same concept. Seek out the professional, in my opinion. Okay.
Yep.
Listen to what the diagnosis is through the discovery. Be open book. Don't sit there because you can't. If you go to a doctor and you don't tell them what's going on in your health, what's the sense of going to
Yeah.
the doctor? And there's no reason to hide it. You should have full exposure to that. So now you go through, you answer the questions and figure out what your diagnosis is. And then here's a procedure or here's a process that we're going to tell you to do to move forward. And you say yes, and you go forward. Doesn't mean you should say yes without questions. Understand where it is because the best process, in my opinion, is someone being taught the process so that I can teach you, so then you can teach others as well. Because if you're training your successors, maybe it's your other associates or you want to exit the business or whatever, then why would you just wanna sit there and do what you're told? Why don't you do what you're told with understanding why? That's
Yeah.
the process that I try to create.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think if the person you're seeking for tax advice, financial structuring, legacy planning, or anything like that doesn't treat you like a doctor would treat you for your medical problems, then that's probably the number one sign that you're not with the right person, right? And think about the last time your CPA or attorney did a diagnostic like that with you. Probably never, right? Because you need someone that understands a lot of different facets that
Hmm,
can help you out with that, correct?
correct. I mean, it's funny, I'll ask how many people and it was one of the common questions I ask the business owners when I speak to them is, "Let me ask you, aside from taking care of your taxes, does your accountant ever talk to you anytime before then?" "No,
Yeah.
unless I have a question for him." "Okay." So, basically, you give them all your numbers at the end of the year, they're a reporter, their job was to fit the numbers inside the boxes and tell you this is how much you owe. Yeah, that's
Mm.
pretty much what it is. And I'm like and they do a great job. There's a lot of great CPAs out there,
Yeah.
so I'm not
And you
trying to
need a
step
CPA,
you
right? You
do.
need a
I mean, I
CPA.
work with a bunch of them. Okay?
Yeah.
Because they're very good at what they do, and there's some that know more than others because they've taken the time to learn it. Listen, when you have 9,000 plus pages in the tax code and
Of
all the
course.
revisions that go with it, and they
Yeah.
continually change them every year, and most of the code was written by legislation. When you think
Yep.
about that here in the United States, that's so you have to know what works for the dynamic of what makes sense for the individual. Yeah, taxes are a pain point. But, I'll ask people a lot of times, you know, "Are you happy with the amount of money you pay in taxes?" And most people, I mean, rhetorically will
Yeah.
say, "No."
No.
Well, it's a different impression because if someone were to ask me the same question, "No, I don't pay enough." And the reason being is if I say it like that is because that means I think I can do more,
Yeah.
okay? It's not something again to pound your chest to say, "Yeah, I don't pay anything in taxes." Listen, if you look at, people, famous people out there, the wealthy people that are in this world that people know about, things like Trump and Elon Musk and Bill Gates and all these other ones, and they sit there and they say, "Oh, this person doesn't pay taxes." Trust me, they pay plenty of taxes. The difference
Yeah.
is they pay it through a different means. Okay. They're not evading taxes. They're doing different strategies, but most of those people there have a team and understand it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And
Mm.
they understand that and they take it to heart. That's why you'll find that most wealthy people don't wanna do anything where they own anything. It's not about walking around saying, "Oh, this is my yacht and this is my building." They could tell you it's their yacht and their building, but their name's probably not on the piece of paper because it's owned by a trust or a different entity or whatever. There's reasons and there's ways that things are done, but they're at those levels. You
Yeah.
don't need to incorporate a lot of those things in a smaller sector because One, they're very expensive to implement. Okay. But they're done for a reason. Okay. It's a choice. And what we try to do is evaluate where you are and say, here's some things you want to do. One of the processes that we'll talk about is as much as we're talking about their business, we want to make sure that they have a trust in place. Why do they want to have a trust? Because I want you to protect what you have, not just for you, but more importantly for your family.
Yeah.
Let's insulate you. Before we talk about anything else, it's the concept. And I use simple analogies all the time. And I'll ask someone, listen, let me ask you a question, Joey. When you drive your car, do you wear a seatbelt?
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
I don't want to be injured
You
if
don't
an
want to be
accident
injured,
happened.
or you don't want to take you want to
Don't want
help
to take a
give
risk.
yourself
Yeah.
a better chance of surviving without injury, right?
Yeah.
So that's the same thing. All I'm trying to do is say, listen, folks, let me show you how to wear your seatbelt in business.
Hmm.
That's what we really try to do. I'm not going to tell you how to run your business. I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't be hiring this person or that person that are there.
Yeah.
Now, if we get into different type of engagement and you're looking for business strategies and business management and structure, then we might get into those particular ones. But I talk about topical, understanding basic business interest and what makes sense. Let me show you how to make your time more effective. Let me show you how to treat your people the proper way. Let me show you the ways that you can keep more of what you make in a process that can help benefit you, but learn to pay yourself first as well, because that to me is probably one of my biggest pet peeves is that if you're doing something today, you need to plan for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And if now is the most opportune time to do it. Because if it's done properly, we can actually use it as one of the strategies where we can show you how to take top line revenue and take it away from your declared income and actually put it and fund it into your retirement through a process that allows you to do that. Understanding again the tax codes. Tax codes are not your enemy. The tax codes are your friend. They were written for the people. That is the main reason. Most people think that the IRS in the United States is the big bad wolf. Listen, that has nothing to do with it as a process. When you look at things that change in legislation, listen, there's a thing right now on there's a bill being proposed that the government is trying to impose a 30% national sales tax and get rid of income tax. Okay. And if anybody out there who thinks that a 30% sales tax nationwide is better than income tax,
Mm.
um,
They don't know
you're
income tax. Yeah.
well, you don't understand income tax because if you're doing that, that means you're going to spend 30% of everything that you spend money on
Yeah.
and you will lose. There's no reason that anyone would want to do that, especially the people that don't understand taxes, because that's an everyday thing. Income taxes necessarily is not.
Mm.
Understand that there's a lot of pieces that go on. Don't go with the major flow. Don't go with the headlines. Don't go with that. Let's look and try to learn things as it pertains to you and your specific business and your design. That's where we break it down. There's a lot of similarities, but there's all individualization. And that's why to go out there and seek somebody. And again, a lot of people don't know there are people like me out there in our organizations that can help them understand how the law works with the tax law, with understanding employment law and different
Mm.
pieces that go there that can give them structure and guidance. See, I'm not a CPA and I'm not an attorney. I work with other CPAs and attorneys that are part of our organization. So
Mm.
we can offer that process. I don't offer tax advice. I offer strategy and design based on the overall picture. And when it gets into the specifics, then we start to go into the finite details and telling them what needs to get done, how it gets implied, what the process is. And that's the design of really what we try to incorporate.
Hmm. No, that's fascinating. And can you dive a bit deeper on what you said? Because I think that probably caught the attention of a lot of people about the strategy. Obviously, depend on the business, depend on your situation, but about declaring a certain aspect of your top line in order to reduce your taxable income. How does that work?
So depending on the type of business, Joey, and way it's structured. So when people form a business today, it could be a sole proprietor, it could be an LLC, it could be an S corp that they come up with, it could be a C corp.
Hmm.
There's different types of partnerships if you're a law firm or different type of professional setup as well. But in order to do a thing called basically deferred comp, which is one of those, or a defined benefit plan, it's a tax code. that we utilize that allows you to put based on the revenue that you declare, and as far as your earnings, you're allowed to put a certain percentage into what they call as a defined benefit plan. A defined
Mhm.
benefit plan could constitute of a 401k, a cash balance plan, something along those lines. A 40, there's different ones, SEP IRAs, there's different pieces,
Mhm.
and there's all different types. Okay. But a
Mhm.
defined benefit plan is where you can put in a top line deduction. So let's say the business is making $3 million a year. And in that percentage, you're able to put $300,000 or $200,000 away as a top line deduction. That money goes into a deferred qualified plan.
Mhm.
Okay. And that qualified plan would either be a 401k, could be, some type of cash option plan or something along those different things. Okay. Now that could be, you could be funding that with inside of an annuity. You could be putting it into insurance. You could be putting into stocks and bonds, whatever you're looking for. So
Mhm.
there's a way to defer that money. It comes off as a top line deduction. So again, $3 million, you're able to write off, say 200,000. So now your gross revenue is down to $2.8 million.
Hmm.
Well, because you didn't have to pay taxes on that $200,000 in revenue in
Yeah.
your standard tax bracket, let's say it was 20%, you say just saved another $40,000 in taxes
Hmm.
this year. And I emphasize that because
Yeah.
when you defer that tax, you're deferring the tax into a later point. The whole concept of that is that once you get to a point of that deferral, so in your 60s or 70s, whatever that may be, what happened is that likely your income is going to be less at that point. So it's going to be less impactful to your tax situation.
Yeah. That's really good. And that's just one of the, I
It's one of
guess,
one of the many
dozens of
ways that we can
strategies. Yeah.
sit there. Yeah, because there's different ways that you can define out. I mean, we will show people in tax strategies and planning,
Mhm.
there are clients that we've reduced their tax liability 80, 90, or 100%.
Mhm.
Okay. And it's not just with one plan. There's no magic bullet, and it's not one plan for everybody that everybody's going to get the same thing. Their dynamic may be in a situation. Listen, we're maybe able to save them 40% in their taxes. Well, I don't care what you're paying at the end of the day. If you're spending 50,000 or 100,000 or $500,000 a year in taxes and I can save you 40%, it's pretty makes a lot of sense to me to sit there and
Yeah.
have that conversation at least to see what the options are.
Yeah.
Okay? That's the mentality. Anyone that typically that will engage with us from that process before we actually will allow them to engage, we have to be able to add value to them. Okay. I won't engage with someone if I know I can't help them. And it's not because it's a pride thing. It's because, listen, I'm not going to give you something or have you put up with something that doesn't make sense for you financially. So if
Yeah.
we're going to be engaged with them and, whatever that number is, it's $10,000, whatever. If I can't at least return 4 to 5 or more to one to that number, then it doesn't make sense for us to do work with them.
Yeah.
Not financially. Doesn't mean we can't guide them and direct them in different things. However, I try to focus on what we focus on. I have a lot of experience that we can have a lot of different conversations. And, I can talk with a lot of different business types because of that. I don't specialize in three. I specialize in a lot of different ones because businesses are all the same basic concept.
At the end
Then
of the
just
day, yeah.
then it just kind of moves into different products and services.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of people, when they look at saving taxes and stuff like that, they try to find that silver bullet. All right, that sexy deduction they can make at the end of the year, or that loophole that we don't know if it's sketchy or not. But at the end of the day, it's 100 golden BBs that makes the strategy works. Right, it's never one main thing, and you need to find someone that can help you see the whole picture and then plug and play the different strategies that's available depending on that. And what, just out of curiosity, from the business owners you meet making between a million to 10 million a year, how many of them just rely on like their CPA or just one other person for all of that stuff? Is it like above 50%, below 50%, higher than that? What would you say?
I'd say it's well over 50% that a lot of
Yeah.
these business owners rely on their CPA because they think the CPA is the person who
Yeah.
is that's the person they feel the most exposed to
And that's
because
the first person you hire most of the
yeah.
time for
Well,
that, right?
the person in business, they think they have a CPA, so it's almost like they're considered the most trusted professional out there because
Yeah.
you're exposing your entire financial network to them
Yeah. You're
theoretically.
vulnerable. Yeah.
So they think because I've exposed it, they're kind of like, it's like me being in front of a doctor and I'm sitting there naked. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I've now exposed myself to all my numbers, so they know everything about me. So
Yeah.
they entrust them at those conversations. I mean, it's amazing. CPAs will get called because their daughters, the business owner's daughters get married and they're trying to figure something out or whatever. They will ask him, and a lot of these guys don't have that kind of experience unless, of course, they've had life experience.
Yeah.
So they'll share those stories with them. I know some CPAs that, I mean, they are very matter of fact and they speak the numbers and that's all they speak. And if you ask them a different question, they say, that's not, I don't work in that field or I
Hmm.
don't do that. Everyone is different, right? They don't have a standard, but they're trained to understand numbers. That's what they went to school for. That's what their process is. And a lot of them are very good at what they do in that specific category. So when we start talking to some of the business owners, again, they were focused on the growth of their business. They really were focused on what they were keeping.
Yeah.
Right? When they've gotten to someone like me, it's because that pain point has been eating at them, right? Because it's relative. They've been paying money in taxes. And unless they've heard or learned from something else, and today with the internet, there's a lot of information at your disposal. Someone else may be using it. So they refer them to, hey, listen, did you ever hear about this or hear about that? So the research method starts beginning. And those are the pieces that we get into. So when we talk to a lot of people, we're using organizations to go out there and create interest like yourself that will go out there and create information to be able to want someone to gather more information. Okay.
Yeah.
So then they'll go out there and they'll seek somebody's guidance, which is awesome because people have known for years about CPAs and attorneys. That's what I need for a business owner. They
Yeah.
don't know other services that are out there unless somebody's knocking on their door, calling them on the phone, or sending them some type of communication. They don't know these other services exist. I can't tell you how many times, Joey, that I've talked to someone who are like, I wish I found someone like you 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I can't go back in time, but all I can try to do is let's not continue making the same mistake and let me help you direct that. So those are what's going on. So I think just like anything else, technology changes very instantly today. Look at AI and everything else that's going on. You
Yeah.
need to change in business as well. You always need to be working on yourself and your business and never get complacent. I would say that's probably the biggest takeaway. I would tell anyone who's listening, don't be complacent in what you're doing. You could always get better in what's going on inside your business for yourself, for your family, for your employees. That is a process. And
Yeah.
open your mind, open your ears, and go out there and listen to information and get associated with people that can provide you other vehicles or ways or paths that you can sit there and help you understand things that are important in structure in business, creating that platform like you talked about, succession planning,
Yeah.
making sure that your family's protected. Those are why we do what we do every day. And sometimes people don't want to face the fact that we're only human
Yeah.
and no one made us perfect and we make mistakes. But one of my favorite quotes that I've ever read was, listen, it's not your choice to fall, but it's your choice to get up. And there's
That's
nothing
really
wrong with making a mistake, Joey. Just keep persevering and go through it because
yeah.
tomorrow is another day and don't make a choice to stay on the ground.
Hmm. Perhaps the takeaway there is for the business owners watching is looking at like go 30,000 foot view above your business and look what are the biggest place that you've been complacent. What's the thing that you've been holding on for the longest time that perhaps would require a second opinion or a change. That's really good. And you made me think about like for me, I know that, and probably other business owners can relate. One of the biggest dilemma, especially if you're the visionary type, the operator type, where you want to create products, create stuff, it's the dichotomy between playing offense and defense, right? Offense, creating new stuff, products, vision, marketing stuff, servicing your customers, and defense, that's the boring stuff, right? That's seeking out people like you, seeking out financial consultants, financial experts, succession planning, legacy stuff, tax efficiency. When would you say is the right time to start also play defense as much as you are willing to play offense in business?
Before you start in business
Right away.
right away. I mean, you have to understand that as the business owner, you're the person in charge. You're the one who's responsible to make the decisions, good, better, and
Yeah.
different. You need to know how to protect yourself. You need to know how to be aggressive. You need to go out there and learn. You got to invest in yourself. Investing in yourself doesn't mean spending money on yourself always. Investing in
Mm.
yourself is taking the time to sit there and learn additional information. Okay. Unless you created a particular product, that may be great. You created the product, but then there's a lot of other pieces that go into it. There's
Mm.
licensing and patenting and all these other things that have to go in from the production standpoint. How do you manufacture? What are cost of goods? There's a lot of pieces that get involved inside of that business. Well, and if you're in a consulting business, there's costs that go into that. I can tell you today still, I mean, I've been in business for over 35 years. Um, I still find myself constantly seeking out additional information. I'm
Mm.
always learning. All right. The ABCs of business will always be closing. I'm always learning. So I use the AL method, always learn because I'm trying to constantly make my situation better so I can help and become more powerful and um, driven in a way that I can help others. It's not about me. I'm good, but I know I could get better. But every time I help myself get better, it's more information that I'm able to disseminate down into people's situations. And to me, measure of success is not the money that's in my checkbook. Measure
Yeah.
of success is the number of people that I've been able to help. My
Yeah.
client or my business statement, my mission statement is to leave people better than I found them.
Yeah. I think that's the law of affection, right? The more people you affect, well, the more wealth, the more memories, the more everything, the more resources you'll be able to attract, which is what you can do to help your family or whatever you want to do. So, no, I totally agree with that. I'm curious also to know in terms of for business owners, let's say paying over $50,000 in taxes, what's the first tactical step they could take to improve their current situation and play more defense in that way?
Make sure you're incorporated properly.
You
Okay.
think it's
I
a
mean,
structure, right? The
it's a
business structure.
structuring. Structuring is a major part of what we want to talk about with people. Okay.
Hmm.
Do you know what your tax dynamic is? Are
Hmm.
you taking, are you structured in the right way? Are you able to take, use the tax laws to your benefit as opposed to as an adversary to you? Okay.
Yeah.
um, Understanding that. So you have to be, again, being a business owner, you have to be on both sides, your offense and defense at the same time. You want to go out there and grab business, but you want efficiencies. You want to make sure that you're able to be more profitable on what you do. You look at restaurants as an example. Restaurants are notorious for going out of business within the first 5 years. The main reason for that is mismanagement. Okay.
Yeah.
They may have a great product, but there's pieces that go to that. You have to be able to market it. You have to be in the right location. You have to have the right cost of services. You got to be careful that you're not overbuying stuff. You get waste. And if you look at most restaurants that are out there, one of the first questions I ask if they serve alcohol, because if they're serving alcohol, they have a higher profit margin. Okay.
Hmm.
Because they run on a very slim budget or slim
Sure.
margin. So they have to learn how to be efficient. Okay. And there are pieces. I mean, I have a client now I'm working with that owns a couple vegetarian and vegan restaurants, two restaurants doing very well, and he's running around 40% profit margin. And I was like, that's phenomenal. That's awesome. But he
Mm.
found a niche. So he's in a niche. The riches are in the niches, as they say in business.
Yep.
So every business is going to be different. And it's understanding that where do I spend the money? Do I do the right type of marketing? Do I do it myself? You'll find a lot of people that try to do everything themselves again because they don't understand the concept of leverage. They're
Mm.
not going to pay someone else when they think they can do it better. Well, that's a control thing for most people.
Hmm.
So you have to sometimes be willing to give up control to let other people do things because again, back to your point when you said in the beginning, the more I'm valuable to my business, the more money I'm costing my business.
Yep.
And I think people need to understand that. So if you have a tax problem, you want to address it. There's ways, seek out professional help. Okay. Don't try to figure it out yourself.
For
Don't
sure.
not pay your taxes. Don't do that. That's against the law. We don't want to do
Yep.
that. Tax evasion bad, right? That's no good.
Yeah.
But seek out proper guidance to educate you as opposed to just say, do this. You're not looking for a product, you're looking for a method. There is a difference
Hmm.
in that analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, that's why I love the 100 golden BBs instead of that one silver bullet to fix the situation. And again, I think every business owner falls into I believe that the shoes that I'm in as well, it's like you never want to play defense. It's not fun, right? It's fun to create more top line. It's fun to create more product and do all that stuff. But I think one advice I'm taking away from that conversation is the that playing defense is as important as offense, keeping more of what you earn. Because that's how you truly have an impact for your faith, for your family, and for the real reasons that you're doing all of that. So I think that's extremely powerful. Mm.
No, I mean, I agree, Joey. And listen, I do what I do because I love what I do. To me, it's not work. And I'm
Yep.
able to help and educate people. I've never, when I talk with someone, I have yet to come across someone who they may have said they're all set, then they're good, but I've always been able to prove something or educate them on something in our conversation. Unless they're just totally ignorant and don't want to listen, which is fine. And there's people out
Yep.
there that I go on to the next one. But it's being powerful. It's knowing what you do and the resources that we have access to,
Yep.
that we constantly have conversations and educate people, you know, going back again, I'm going to leave people better than I found them. Now, does everybody engage with me? No, they don't. And you know what? Some things aren't meant to be, and I understand that. I go on to the next person. I look for someone else. Opportunity of working with people is there on a continual basis. It's a personality thing is another big part of that. People
Yep.
wanna feel like they're valuable in the conversation. They wanna be respected for what they're doing. They don't wanna be told that they were wrong in everything that they did,
Yep.
okay? And it's not their fault. And I tell people that, "Listen, it's not your fault. You just didn't have the other information provided to you. You weren't associated maybe with the right person for you, okay?" And I've had some people that have had the same CPA, they used them for 20 years. And
Yeah.
I'm not telling them that they have to switch to a different CPA, but it's a process. And sometimes you have to make uncomfortable decisions.
Mhm.
Sometimes, listen, if you think you're going to do the same thing over and over every year and think you're going to get a different result, then that's the definition of insanity.
Insanity. Yeah.
And we don't want to do that. We're trying to
No.
get better. We're not trying to make you bitter.
Yep.
And that's the process that we really try to emphasize on.
Hmm. I think one main piece of advice as well that I've gathered from this is just be resourceful. Like you said, like we live in a era right now where there's information saturation, right? Information is now a commodity with AI, with online, everybody on social media. Like you can find you have so much options. The consumer has so much options, so many options right now they can choose to for whatever they want, and including tax planning, right? Scaling, legacy structuring. They have options for that. So just seek out and try to look at 30,000 foot view of your business and see where you've been complacent and just try to find if there's any better options out there that you can do to help your situation there. So that was really good, Russ. And just to close this off, I want to hit you with the legacy question that I want to ask every guest after this show. I think that's a good one. I want to know and be thoughtful about this one. If this episode outlives all of us in the next decades, right? What's the one timeless lesson about scaling wealth, keeping more of what you earn that you'd want future entrepreneurs to remember?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. Um, I don't have to think about it a lot because I live it every day.
Mhm.
And the mentality is that do it for the right reason. And if you have a value set in your mind of why you're doing something, it will give you the drive and the understanding to move forward, to go through the ups and the downs and live inside of that world. Always seek out help is always, to me, one of the most prevalent things that a lot of people think, I got this. I can handle this.
Mhm.
I got this on my own. Well, unless you can sit there and look in the mirror and to say that you honestly know everything, you don't. So when you have information available, seek it. Okay. Go out there, see how it applies to your specific world, your business, your family. Go out there and seek others' advice and attention or direction so that you can help circumvent that. Because at the end of the day, Joey, most people are good people and they would
Yep.
rather help somebody out rather than
Yep.
sit there and take something away from them. So most people I know, whenever I've been asked, I always enjoy helping others to raise them up. And that's the process because that is why I set my core strategy the way I did. So that's where I would say my legacy will live on based on the concept of what I try to process and what I try to share with others. And that's the mentality.
That's great, Russ. That's great. Well, thank you for your time, Russ. It was an amazing conversation. Hopefully, gave some great golden nuggets and great value for business owners watching this. If you're watching this, you found this valuable. All I'm asking, if you hit the subscribe button, give it a like, ask your questions in the comments, share this to another business owner that would need to learn that also and get some advice there. And there's going to be more of that coming up. So, thank you for your time, and we'll catch you on the next one.